In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us pray for justice, peace, and let us thank God for all the graces we received during this academic year. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mary, seat of wisdom,
pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So tonight we cover two subjects. First, the idea of virtue, and the second, the justice and right. And with that we cover the subject of ethics, the essential. Okay, first, virtue. So what is a virtue? The word virtue comes from the Latin vir, that means man, opposed to filet. And opposed to that is mulier, in Latin, mulier, vir, mulier. And vir comes from this, and this means violence, force, violence. So this is applied to man, and the word is vir. And virtue is coming from that. Is the habit of the one who is strong. Is virtuous, is strong. In the Tantum Ergo, of course you sing that many times, probably without understanding what you sing. You say, virtus quoque. Virtus quoque. Virtus quoque, that means also. So virtus means power, strength. That in the Tantum Ergo, that the meaning is not virtue. It is power, strength. Okay? So what all the elements are at, and to explain how man achieves his natural end in this life by the activity of virtuous living according to his right reason. So first, a virtue is something stable, perfecting man in his way of living. In such a way, he will attain his last end. The virtue, it is to help man to have a conduct, a way of living that will allow him to attain his destiny, eternal end. So a virtue is a good habit. Habit comes from the verb habeo in Latin, to have. Like in English, it's interesting. V, to have, to possess. And the participle past, it is habitus, habitum. And you have habit, to possess, habit. And to possess a virtue is a habit, something we possess. But we possess because we acquired. Father Reichman, in his book Philosophy of Man, the human person, he says that it is acquired operational structure. So it is structure. It is something added to you, to your person. When you are born, we are the same. But we have many different experiences in our life, many things happen, so we don't have the same structure. Not everyone here has the same personality, no? Because we did not have the same experiences, etc. So, I give you an example. If you have a tractor, okay, a tractor. With a tractor, we can do many things. I can put a plow here, and Connecticut is very useful during winter. I can use to cut the grass. I can use to make furrows. I can use to plow the wagon, many. But the tractor is the power, but the power cannot by itself, the tractor by itself cannot plow, he cannot make furrows, he cannot hollow wagon. He has to be, we must add something to the tractor. We must give to the tractor a kind of structure. Huh? A structure, the structure of a plow, the structure of a cutter, etc. So it's the same for us. We have an intellect, we have a will, and we have many powers, but our powers, to be efficient, must acquire a structure. But the simple example is language. Language. We are born with the mouth and with the tongue. And we acquire, little by little, a language. It's interesting to see the Chinese, a boy or girl, they were adopted. They speak English at the age of 5, 6, 7, but they cannot speak Chinese. They have a structure. Their mouth is not structured. They acquire a habit, the habit of speaking English, or the habit of speaking French or Spanish or German, etc. So that is, and when it is for a good act, a good action, we call that virtue. When it is acquired to do something operational, to produce action, activities. So that device is given to the tractor to do many different activities. A habit and a virtue is given, is acquired, it is something added to my human person, as a human person. We call that personality. There is a difference between person and personality. So to be virtuous is to have a personality that with a structure allowing us to do good action. And a vice, it is a structure helping us to do that action. Vice, okay? So I read the text here. A good habit, more specifically, is a habitual, we saw that, remember, habitual, well-established readiness. Characteristic of a habit is to do something easily, with ease, rapidly, speed, fast, and sure, with certitude, with surety. Ease, it is easy. For example, somebody who acquired the habit of playing the piano, but he plays with ease. If everything is simple. No, he plays with ease. Rapidly, speed, rapidly. You know, if you are a pilot, the pilot must acquire the capacity of piloting a plane. So he must think, it must be easy for him. He must be able to do decisions rapidly and surely. You know? A good example of that is the pilot who landed on the Hudson River, you remember? That pilot, and landed, his plane the Hudson River, like that. He had a good habit. He acquired an operational structure of piloting a plane. He was able to do that with ease, rapidly, and with surety. A virtue is that. To practice any virtue, we have to be able to do that easily, to do that rapidly and surely. If you have to take suppose you have to take a decision, you find you find the wallet, you find the wallet on the street, but you open the wallet, there is money, $500. Okay? So if you are virtuous, easily you will say, I will search for the owner. Easily you will try to call him or to go to his house, and you know, with total certitude. That is virtue. If you say, oh, you know, $500, it's very good, I can use that. That is. And after deliberation, no, that is not virtue. Virtue, it is to rapidly. Okay. Okay, I continue. Or disposition of manpower. So it is to perfect your power, perfect the human power to do things. For example, with your hand, you can do a lot of things. You can clean the board, you can knit, you can play the piano, you can cook, etc., etc. Many things. And you acquire some habit to perfect your power and directing them to some specific goodness of action. That is a virtue. The virtue is not to produce beautiful music, is not to produce a beautiful sweater, it is to produce something, a good action, moral action. Father Werner gave you, I continue the text after. As such, virtue is not the approval given and active after it has been performed. Virtue is not, in fact, to be virtuous is more important before the action than after. No? Habit, it is to perform an action. So it is a disposition to do something before. So the utility of the habit, it is not to judge if I did that well. It is to do something good, well. Okay? So, but the source of action, operation, a modification over and above a native power, inclining it toward its full realization in action. So the power is given to me to prepare, to organize the future, to organize my action. And when you do that, you use what we call your antecedent conscience. Because you use your ability, your disposition to produce good action. And when you do that, if you are virtuous, you should use your reason. And when we use our reason before an action, we call that antecedent conscience, before the action. After is the consequent conscience, when the action is done and we say, did I do well or not? That is after the action. So Werner gives you a good definition, the second line. It is an operative, operative habit, perfecting rational powers. And I will say here, even sense power. Not only rational, they even sense power. Because when you exercise your sense power, you exercise them also with your mind. When you have the capacity of, for example, of eating, it is a capacity of power we have. We exercise that not only with your body, you exercise that with your mind. Okay. Continue. To act according to the rule of reason, to the rule of reason, to right reason. That means to act morally, a good way, a virtuous way. Now, a virtue, we distinguish among the virtue some virtues that are central. And those virtues that are central, we call that cardinal. Well, cardinal comes from Latin cardo. Cardinis, that means hinge. When you have a door, you have hinges. And the door turns around the hinges. So in virtue, we have 4 hinges. We call the 4 cardinal virtue. It is what we are studying now. It is the object of our study tonight, the 4 cardinal virtues. So one of the, okay. Now a diversity of virtues. Diversity of virtues, diversity of habits. Because every habit is to attain some different activity. The habit of playing the piano is to make music. The habit of cooking is to produce good pie. The habit of etc. Okay? When we touch the reality, we react. I will not forget that. Okay, so just as there is a diversity of powers of man, and what are the power of man? The first power, the most important, to define us, it is the intellect. Huh? And the other, it is the appetite. And we have many, the intellect is to receive the form of things, we saw that. Huh? But the appetite is to go toward the form of thing. We want to have appetite, adherence towards something, appetite. And we have appetite at the level of the intellect. We call that the will. The will. But we have also sense appetite. And sense appetite, we distinguish, we saw that already. Concupiscible appetite, desirable, desiderative, concupiscible. It is not in Merriam-Webster. And irascible. Concupiscible, that means we are tending towards some good, some pleasure, and irascible, it is to fight to attain that pleasure, to fight, courage, okay? So we have virtue perfecting. So what is the virtue, the habit perfecting the intellect when we take a decision? That virtue is the virtue of prudence. Prudence. When I studied remember the Human Act according to St. Thomas, all that here was on the intellect. And here, when we take a decision and when we apply that, we use our intellect, apply to concrete reality, to moral action, we call that prudence, virtue of prudence. In fact, every virtue, to practice any kind of act of virtue, we must be prudent. Why? Because we must use our intellect, our intellect. Now, the virtue perfecting the will. The will is tending toward the good, no? But the intellect is tending toward the truth. The will is tending toward the good known through the intellect. What is that virtue? Tending toward the good, but the right good, the good according to the natural law. It is justice. Justice is perfecting the will in this tendency toward the good, the good. Because in everything we will it under the aspect of good. We saw that. Evil is an absence of good in something good. Now the concupiscible, that is pleasure. We are searching for pleasure. We like that. Okay, pleasure. The pleasure in many activities. Sense activity. Sense activity. For example, in eating, in drinking, etc. That is the virtue controlling our concupiscible appetite. It is temperance. So temperance is a habit we acquire through exercise, helping us to control our desire for pleasure, And pleasure is something real in our life. We cannot neglect pleasure. And when we eat an apple, it is good, And finally, here we have I will say the irascible. Irascible, it is when we have to face danger, when we have to face something difficult, something difficult, some difficulty, some suffering, etc., some contradiction. So the virtue which help us to pass through difficulties, to face danger, to triumph over fear, etc. That is the virtue of fortitude. So that we have the four virtues, and all the other virtues are attached to that. Is the reason why we call them cardinal. They are the 4 hinges of the virtuous door. And all those virtues are attached to one of the 4 virtues here. They are the most important, the center, the 4 virtues. Okay? So I go now to the text here, page 458. So the division of virtue, I read the text. Just as there is a diversity of power in men, diversity of power, will, intellect, will, concupiscence, appetite, irascible appetite, etc. So there is a diversity of virtues, and indeed a greater diversity than that of powers. In fact, we have there is more virtues than powers. For example, if you look at the temperance, you can have, temperance in the usage of liquid, of alcohol, temperance in sexuality, it is chastity. So all the virtue attached to control, to control my different tendency. So many virtues will be attached. We see that soon, the division of virtue. Okay. So a different virtue is necessary to equipment to achieve it. So that means every time we have to attain a special object corresponding to a power, we must have a habit, a good habit to be able to have a moral conduct. And that is the essential. Here we have the essential. Living virtuously, it is to live in that, according to those virtues. Okay, now we will study that one by one. Now the subjects of virtue are the power. What is perfected? When I put a plow to my tractor is the subject of receiving the plow to work. So the subject of virtues are the powers. In fact, those virtues are perfecting the many powers. Intellect, will, concupiscence, appetite, irascible appetite. And the power that is perfected, it is perfected by a virtue. Well, I think it's not very complicated. First, a virtue is an acquired operational structure. And if you look at the other definition, they say almost the same thing. It is something stable. A virtue must be stable. A virtue only for a weekend is not stable. You say, I will not drink, Okay, I will go to the party, and Mr. X says to his wife, oh, I will control myself, I will not drink. Okay, but for the next, so it's not stable. A virtue is not only for one weekend, or only one occasion. It is something permanent. That is the difficulty today with kids, with adolescents, even with adults, to commit to something that is permanent. They are able to do something courageous. They will pray, they will Lord the Lord. A weekend after that, regularity. That is so important. That is virtue. Virtue is in the stability. Stability. Okay? And it is something stable, permanent. Permanent. It is stable, permanent. And what is that? It is a quality. That means it perfects. It is something determining, perfecting. It is a quality. It is the category quality. In fact, we don't possess a habit. We are perfected by the habit. And the habit, of course, we say I have a habit, the habit of playing the piano. But in fact, it is not something we possess, it is something that perfects us, like a quality. Okay, it's something beautiful. Can we say that object possesses beauty? Now, possess a part of beauty. A part of the need, it is a quality we share in when we practice virtue. It is to produce something good. Okay, and okay, so that's the characteristic and the stability and permanence. Stability and permanence. So if I have a confrère in my community, he is not very old, he knows one piece on piano. And for 45 years I know him. When he sits down to the piano, he plays always the same tune.
That's his favorite.
Always the same tune. He cannot play other things, he knows only that. But he plays only that. Can I say he has the virtue, the habit of playing the piano? No. It is only that. You know that, but only that. No more. Okay? Like Americans, when they go to the young Americans, they went to Mexico, they worked for development of Mexico. And the Mexicans, they sang. And they asked Americans, what can you sing? They know only Jingle Bell. Jingle Bell. So no, it is something permanent, something stable, and also virtue implies progress. It's another idea. You cannot in virtue, if you don't progress, you regress. A good example of that is bicycle. If you go on a bicycle, you stay stable and you don't fall, only when you are progressing. When you stop, it's finished. You cannot continue. That is the virtue, is that. Something permanent, something stable, and also at the same time implying a progress. A progress. Those who read the breviary, recently we have some passage from the book of Revelation. And he said, I prefer you are lukewarm. I prefer you be
Hot or cold.
hot or cold, you know. No, virtue, if you become lukewarm, if you become stable, stable does not mean no progress. Stable does not mean there is a continuity, but a continuity in the progress. Okay? For example, I study Spanish. I cannot say, no, I know Spanish, finish. No. You have to learn all the time new words, new expression, adapt to the accent of the people. It's not finished. It's not finished. The same for English, in any language. Okay. And virtue also, because why? Because in life, circumstances in life are changing. If you are, suppose you have 10 parents, but your 10 parents, you have to practice that in many circumstances, in many circumstances. But you have to, like a virtue is like, if you don't use it, if you don't practice it, you will lose it. It's the same for music. I did not practice music for about 15 years. Well, I can go, but I'm not at ease the same way I was at ease like 15 years ago. Okay. Okay, the subject I summed up with you. Next page, page 459. So we have two kinds of power. When we spoke about power, we have power that are fixed and determined by nature. For example, the vegetative power. When a boy and a girl grows at the age of 12, 13, 14, that is fixed and determined by nature. I cannot try to be taller only by exercise. No, it is in my nature, grow little by little. Okay? And sensory power also. For example, the instinct of an animal. They are fixed. They are fixed in their nature. For example, a cat is determined by nature to run after mice. It is his nature to move. You know, he will not run after acorn. No, that's a squirrel. Okay? And for that kind of operation is determined by nature. It is something fixed, or we can say it's almost innate. For example, for a bee, it's innate to make an hexagon. For a spider to make a web. They never study architecture, but they do something marvelous. Marvelous, but it's instinct. But there are other power in which originates activity, that is expression and control self-realization. That means those activities, they are humanly determinable. When I say self-realization, I speak about also self-determination. And remember, what is self-determination? It is, what is auto-determination? It is freedom. Freedom, not the habit. So that habit, relative to action, because in fact all ethics, all morality is linked with the will, with freedom. Besides that, the voluntary and involuntary, that's class. So that power we have to realize ourselves, it is the users of our freedom. And when we have to act morally, to perfect ourselves, to realize our nature, we have to be held by the virtues. It is by the practice of virtue that I realize myself. I become more human, I realize what I have to be through the practice of virtue. For example, through the virtue of prudence, I develop my judgment in regard of concrete reality. And by the virtue of justice, I perfect my will. So I become virtuous, and that acquisition of good habit helped me to have a good life, a moral life, and to attain my destiny, my eternal destiny. So those virtues are very, very important because they are building yourself. When we are born, we receive a personhood. After that, we have to develop that personhood. And we develop that personhood at the moral point of view. We realize our mission, to our call, to be a human person, to use our faculty correctly. When we develop, we live according to the four cardinal virtues. Here I don't speak about theological virtue. That is not the object of philosophy. In philosophy we speak about the cardinal virtue, moral virtue. But those moral virtues, they perfect myself. Those moral virtues, they help me to become what I have to be. I must be a man complete, developed, with virtue, tending toward my last end, in relation with God, in relation with others, in relation with the creation. And what helped me to do that is the virtue, especially in regard with relation with others, with God and with her, is the virtue of justice. To give to each one what is due, to give to God what is due, because I know through my reasoning that I depend on another, an absolute. The virtue of justice, the controlling, helping my relation with others, and the virtue of justice also helping me to use the nature, justly. We call that now ecology. So ecology is a part of justice, is a virtue belonging to justice. Religion is a part of justice. Interesting. Justice in regard of God, it is religion. Justice in regard of creature, it is ecology. And justice for others, it is commutative justice, distributive and legal. We study that. And that is a good example to see that justice is a genus, and many other virtues are attached to justice. Why? Because justice essentially is to give each one his due. It's a virtue helping me to give each one his due. So when I adore God, I give to God his due. When I help my brother, I pay my taxes, that is community justice, I give to other what is due. And when I respect nature, I use nature correctly, I am also practicing justice. Okay? Number 44.2.2. Only those powers in which originate activity, that means intellect, the will, concupiscible appetite, and irascible appetite, that is the expression of man-controlled self-realization, can be the subject of virtue. So the emotive power, here I say sense power, but here Father Wallace used the word emotive power, because those powers provoke emotion, sense power or emotive power, or sensitive appetite, are perfected by the virtue of temperance and the virtue of fortitude, irascibility. Our tendency, our pleasure is controlled by temperance. Don't forget, temperance is a virtue because it is illuminated by the intellect, virtue of prudence, and it is sustained by the virtue of justice. In fact, in every virtue, we have prudence and we have justice. We cannot practice a virtue without having the habit of prudence, because a moral act is always made with the intellect. Okay? So the virtue of prudence. And also the virtue of justice. Because virtue is always in the middle, between two extremes. The just middle, the just middle. So just. It's interesting that in the Old Testament, when they want to speak about a holy man, they never use the word holy man. I told that to you, I think. They use Justus and prudent. Justus and prudent. Justus, just, Justus and prudent. Vir, virtue, vir. Justus and prudent. Saint Joseph, vir, Justus and prudent. In fact, that is holiness. To use my intellect correctly, to guide my action toward the last end, to realize my own total mission as a man, and prudence, using my intellect to find. Those two virtues are present in every virtue, moral virtue. We can say they are the soul of virtue. There is no virtue without prudence. Because prudence will help you to find the just middle. And just is justice, So they are together. All the other virtues depend on those two virtues. In fact, every human action depends on the intellect and the will, no? St. Thomas, remember? Every action depends on the action of my intellect, and that my intellect acting, judging the value of the action and the means, that is virtue of prudence. And when I take a decision, 6 and 8, when I take a decision, a good decision to attain the good, I am in the virtue of justice. Even when I practice temperance, I use those virtues. To drink, not too much, just in the middle, It's a virtue. Virtue is not to drink at all. And you have a meeting with the bishop, with the mayor of the city, etc. And there is wine, or there is, I don't know, tequila, etc. You say, no, water. Of course, if you are an AA, that is another thing. But if you are not an AA, and you say, okay, I will try rum and coke. Okay, rum and coke. But I am able to control. I will not take a bottle of rum. No. That, I try to find the just middle. Just middle. Judgment. What is judgment? Huh? To find the truth. When I was a teaching brother before becoming a holy apostle. And in the constitution of the brother, the first number one was, what are the conditions to become a brother, a teaching brother? First, to be baptized. Second, to have a good judgment. To have a good judgment. If you don't have a good judgment, if you don't have the virtue of prudence, we are not called to educate others. And many problems come from the people, they don't have judgment, they don't have the virtue of prudence. Okay? Now, the human virtue are acquired through repeated acts, but be careful, not only repeated, there must be progress, I told that to you. And to have progress, we must pay attention. So, there is to progress, we want to will to progress. When I was a young teacher, I taught the piano to beginners. I am a specialist for beginners. Beginners in philosophy, beginners in music. Probably my vocation should be to work in the kindergarten. And some children, they learn a piece very well, but they stop always at the same place. After that, they continue. So what they have to practice, they have to find a place. Now they prefer to play what they like, but they cannot progress. They cannot progress. Because to progress, we have to improve, to work on the difficulties. I try, many times they were not, I say, no, don't play piano, no, that's not no use. Huh? Because you have to face the difficulty. That is not true only for piano, it is true for every moral action. Huh? When there is a difficulty in a moral action, we have to face it. We have to progress, and the progress is made by little victory. Huh? Little victory. We don't become temperate only in 1 minute. Huh? It is a question of education. And your mother told you, hey, be reasonable, be reasonable. Huh? So after that, when we took strawberries, huh? Be reasonable. After that, be reasonable. And when you were 16, when you go to the party, be reasonable. What is that, be reasonable? Practice the virtue of prudence. Huh? Use your judgment. Develop the virtue of prudence. Huh? Okay? So all human habits, in fact, are generated and developed, and these habits are either good or bad, virtue or vices, depending on the kind of action that brings them to being. So a virtue, a habit can be good, a habit can be also evil. For example, the habit of how do we say, the pickpocket. Pickpocket. That is a habit that's acquired. I realized that once in my life. I was a teacher in a high school, and I have a discussion with a student of 11th, 12th grade. It was about the question of pickpocket. So I have a student, he has a pen here, over here. And I wanted to prove that I was able to take his pen. He did not realize that. We talked together, and when I was talking with him, I took his pen. After that, of course, I gave him. I realized it is an art to be pickpocketing. It's an art. You have to distract the person, and when the person is distracted, concentrated on something, you take what you want. You take his watch, you take... That is the art of magic. Magic is that. They concentrate on something, and during that time they do other things, So that we can develop for the good, we can develop for the bad. A vice is acquired. A vice is acquired. Is the reason why the first action we do, good or we do bad, are very, very important. The first time someone begins to smoke pot, to take heroin, or to steal to have money, he does that by will. He is already responsible for acquiring the habit after that. Is the reason why it must be very, very attentive not to create needs. And now you know what are doing the gangsters? They go around school, and sometimes they give pot, they give drug to children 8 years old, 9 years old, to create a need, and they become slave after that. And when they are slave, and they commit, they rob, and sometimes they commit murder. Okay? To create, it's the same for cigarette. You know, it's proved today that a cigarette is addictive. Huh? And the company knew that in the past, but they didn't want to say that, to keep people buying cigarettes, enslaving people to cigarettes. I don't see that. All those who smoke cigarettes are slaves of tobacco company, but they must be aware of that. It's a need. Even some seminarians here, they smoke, and so they know, but they have difficulty to get rid of. It's difficult. A good habit, we can lose that easily. A bad habit is difficult to lose it. It's difficult. Okay? The habit of lying, for example. I know a case, maybe you saw the movie, The Great Imposter. Tony Curtis is playing, I know that person personally, I met the person in the movie, I met him in person. In fact, he became a great imposter. He became a specialist. Incredible what he did in his life. He did very, very good thing, but always as an imposter. And he began to acquire that when he was 12 years old. He began to play the role of other, and he enjoyed that. He developed that so much. All his life he was like that. And you see the movie, The Great Imposter, and that is a reality. Because he entered our society, the congregation. That meant. So we can acquire good habit, we can acquire also bad habit. And then the development of virtue is not incidental, it's not accidental. We are responsible for the habit we acquire. Responsible. And we are responsible to continue to keep them. To keep them. The habit to go to Mass on Sunday. We are responsible to continue. A habit is never acquired forever. When you stop, don't forget on the example of the bicycle. When you stop practicing, pedaling, moving, you fall. It's the same for spiritual life, etc. Then the development of virtue is not accidental. So, now a word about temperance. Temperance is the virtue of moderation in desires and pleasures, especially in impulse emotions, and the control of our emotion, the control of our passion. And on page 460, Father will give you second, number 2, a good definition of temperance. It is the cardinal virtue of habitual moderation, moderation in the use of sensibly pleasurable things, according to the rule of right reason. According to that means using my right reason. So what is temperance, the role? It is to repress emotion, to control emotion. It is important to control emotion because we don't control our emotion, we can do many things and after we regret. But rather to temper emotion so as to attain a reasonable sensibility that strike the note between the immaturity and insensibility. Immaturity, no control. Insensibility, no sensation. I don't know if you saw the movie Babette's Feast. In that movie, you remember, those who saw that movie, there is a banquet organized by Babette, a French cook, chef. And it is so good. And those people in that sect must not have pleasure. Pleasure is sin. So when they eat that good meat, that good wine, they must manifest no emotion. So what they try, they speak about anything, not to express their emotion. We cannot suppress our emotion, but we can control that. And we can control them when we acquire the virtue of temperance. And here we have the formation of the character. When children are used to make some sacrifice to control themselves, not to take the peanut or the grape before the meal. Control yourself. Okay? Temperance. A special virtue is moderate the pleasure of food and drink, and sex arising from the sense of touch. In fact, a pleasure is linked with touch, emotion, touch, the sense of. Okay. Well, we can have pleasure also in seeing, in listening. There's a pleasure to listen to music, a pleasure to smell perfume of flower. Okay. Now there are the component virtues in temperance. It has many parts of component virtues, each of which confers a special skill. So those virtues would depend on temperance. They are branches, if you want, of temperance. For example, in the wrestling, greediness for food, achieving sobriety. Sobriety, we see sobriety. Sobriety. In becoming chaste. In developing unwillingness for the infliction of pain. Here's again sadism. Some people, they have pleasure to make others suffer. You know, all those games we see in the end of children, it is to kill. And you know, they have a pleasure to kill. I killed 12,000, 3,000, oh, kill. It's a pleasure. We are not surprised that the same kids, they go to eat Middle East now. Recently, they stopped 2 girls, 14 years old. They were going to join. He is 14 years old. The pleasure of killing. You know, those play games are based on that. And there are some programs, they are based on making suffer. You know, it's funny, wrestling, wrestling. So, in my province, when I was young, I never went there, but I saw that on television. When the wrestler is torturing the other, people say, make him suffer, you know. Pleasure to make, that is animal. That is an instinct we have to control through temperance. And that, it's very serious because somebody can be sick. It can kill by pleasure of killing. You know, they mentioned in California 30 years ago. That is pleasure of killing. Pleasure of killing. And I'm sure that those ISIS who kill, they have a pleasure. And sometimes they take drug that they excite that pleasure to kill. But that begin very young. There's a reason why I say those games are not innocent. For me, they are very dangerous. Because we develop that instinct, pleasure of killing, making suffer, So think about some kid when they take a cat and they torture the cat. That is not an invention that exists. In England, a few years ago, remember, two boys, 8 years old, they took in a store a child, 3 years old, and they tortured him up to death. 8 years old. That is instinct of death, instinct of death, the pleasure to kill, the pleasure to kill, the pleasure to make others suffering, suffer. And also all those movies of horror, they are not innocent also. They are not innocent. When a culture needs to see blood and to see death, to have emotion, that is not sane. It's not good. In that our culture is like that now. And millions of dollars they enter in the pocket of
We'll do that. The virtue of fortitude corresponds to the virtue for the contending emotion, to struggling emotion. Virtue for combat, for fight. Father Fuller defined the habit of restraining fear and moderating rashness in the presence of danger, so that man follows the rule of reason in doing good or enduring evil in spite of the danger. For example, Jean Moulin, I spoke about him, I think last class, the French were the chief of the resistance in France. He was taken and he was tortured up to death, you know. He has the virtue of fortitude. He has the virtue of fortitude. He has the courage to face death. Or when a doctor is called in a time of epidemic, like Ebola, and they go there, that is fortitude. Face the danger with courage. It's the virtue of courage, to have courage. Next page, audacity also, audacity. So the role of fortitude, it is to enable a person to adopt and adhere to a reasonable course of action when faced by danger, and particularly by danger of death. I saw yesterday, I think, a car was in fire, and somebody, a policeman, arrived, and he tried to save the driver. The car was in flame, and he broke with his gun the window. He took it, and you know, it was very courageous, but the car can explode at any second. You know, that is courage, face the danger. Now the component of that virtue. So it is, for example, to strike vigorously and aggressively against evil, audacious, audacity. Audacity is a part of fortitude, to audacity, to endure, endurance, to be patient in adversity, perseverance. Perseverance is here. Perseverance. It is a virtue, less and less practice. Perseverance. Perseverance in marriage. Perseverance in virtue. Perseverance in my faith. Perseverance. We are in a society for change. For us, change is a virtue. Change is not necessarily a virtue. I don't know when an actor or actress in Hollywood changed 7 times her husband. I don't think it's a progress. Well, we are not to condemn, but we can say it's better to be faithful, perseverant, fidelity. Fidelity, perseverance. You know, when we say the rosary, we ask that grace. Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. What is that? Perseverance. To the end. The mean now between the excess and the fault. Temperance and fortitude are virtue of moderation, and as such they achieve their perfection by seeking the meaning between excess and defect. In fact, to find the just middle. In that just middle here will be found by prudence and justice. So the just middle between two excesses. To do this, we work together with prudence, so that their activity are regulated by the control of reason. Each of their initial act must be deliberate and proper, and so in conformity with right reason. They are sensible action, but they are controlled by the intellect and the will, and because of that they are moral action. Moral action. Later, the later expression means only that the control of reason must be in conformity with man's nature. That means I must use my intellect to find what I have to do to continue to be a human being, rational animal. Okay? And thus conduce to the development of the good and perfect man at the end. who eventually endowed with all the human virtues and lives according to them. So the perfect man should practice all those virtues. Because it is through the practice of those virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude, that he will realize clearly his nature of man, rational animal. He will realize fully his animality and his rationality. For when we are awakened, all our actions are human, because we are awake. You eat, you take a shower, you know that, there is a meaning for you, there is an end for, all that is moral action. Okay? Of course, this is not the same to pray the Mass, but it is a moral action. And if you do that according to your reason, you act morally. It is ethical, it is moral to take a shower at least once a year.
Whether you need it or not.
In the past they used perfume because they were afraid of water. They say water is dangerous. Water is dangerous. Okay, the virtue of prudence now is the recta ratio agibilium. What is the meaning of that? Recta, I mean right, right, correct, right. Ratio, reason. The right reason, agibilium, that means the thing able to be done. Agibilium, agibilium, the thing to be done. The thing able to be done. So that is virtue of prudence. The right reason in relation with the act I can do, I may do to realize my human nature. So the repetition of such morally good acts gradually rectifies the appetite, producing in them habitus of action. The more you practice act of virtue, the more you become virtuous. Virtue is developed by practicing, like piano, the same thing. Okay? If you have the habit to tell the truth, you will be virtuous. If you have the habit of lying, then you will be vicious. And you become more and more liar. The more you lie, the more you become vicious. The more you tell the truth, the more you become true, you become virtuous. Okay. Now next page, 462. So the latter habit is the virtue of prudence, we saw that, while the habit of action in the appetite are temperance and fortitude. So we saw the virtue perfecting our sense appetite, our emotion, temperance and fortitude. The virtue perfecting our way of judging, it is prudence, and the virtue helping us to find the just middle and to give each one his due is the virtue of justice. So now we have to say a word about, I will read the text. Each appetite is consequently said to be right or rectified insofar it is in conformity with my reason. And what is to be in conformity with my reason? It is to practice the virtue of prudence. Prudence is to have a good judgment about the end, the action I do, and the means I use to attain my end. Okay? And now we speak about end and means. So, end. This way of speaking, it should be noted, does not involve a vicious circle. So the judgment of prudence is said to be right, insofar it is in conformity with the end to which the appetite really inclines. And we saw that last class before. The end is at the end, but the end is at the beginning, And the end is also in the means. In fact, the end is from the beginning to the end. Okay. The judgment of prudence will be, in fact, we have to use prudence from the beginning to the end. We cannot stop judging what is good or what is not good. Constantly we use our mind. Of course, we are not always conscious of that, but we use our mind. We use our mind. Every sensation we receive, they are appreciated. They are appreciated. And if one is dangerous, you will react. Why? Because you are conscious. You know, it's not necessary to say, I am conscious, I am conscious, I drive my car, but you are, your mind is working, I hope. Instead you sleep. Now the means, the appetite, I finish by that, huh? The appetite themselves are said to be right insofar as they are in conformity with the means toward the end. And that means found for them by the judgment of right reason. So right reason not only find the end of my action, right reason, find the end, why I am doing that, but also help me to find the means to attain that end. So prudence is important, not only to discover the end, prudence is important to find the right means. You remember here, the St. Thomas, no? Before taking the decision to do or not to do, and the decision to take that means, we have to use to deliberate, to use our intellect, and that is the virtue of prudence. So I continue. Okay, I continue. It is time to take a rest. So to summarize that, in fact, here you have all the virtues we study except one. Next class we study here, justice. Justice, we'll see, is the form of all virtue. There is no virtue if the virtue is not conformed to justice. And there is no virtue also if my intellect is not working. That means prudence and justice must be present to every act of temperance and every act of fortitude. That is the condition, those acts be moral, be good, morally good. Okay, so next class we consecrate our time for the virtue of prudence. Virtue of justice.